Welcome to another episode of the Connecting Through Technology podcast powered by Intellacall. I'm your host, Jonathan Coore, and today I have the privilege of speaking to Sue Hershkowitz-Coore, the sales trainer and communications expert at High Impact Presentations. With a proven track record of driving results in the hospitality and pharma industries, Sue helps sales professionals re-engineer the way they communicate both digitally and virtually with research-based content that allows buyers to feel safe and smart. Welcome to the show, Sue.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's kick this off right away. My first question, really has to do as far as the inception, as far as, how you got started in sales and seeing that you've been a part of your own business at High Impact Presentations 35 years ago. I wanted to ask you, how did you get started in the sales field?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I was selling raffle tickets for my mother because if she worked for some charitable organization, and if she could sell enough tickets, then she could go to their luncheon for free. And we really couldn't afford for her to go there any other way. So I started knocking on doors. And the next thing was when I was in college, I learned to sell Encyclopedia Britannica. That's kind of baptism by fire. In fact, my first client, they said, you had to pay actually in those days to learn to sell, which was cool because I did learn some fundamentals. And they said, remember, you need to do this right away. You need to. And so I just pulled into a neighborhood and they were interested. But when they offered me something to drink, a glass of water, there was nothing else in their refrigerator. So I talked them out of buying the set of encyclopedias because the library was. And that was how I started selling. And then it went from there. I started teaching school. English has always been my thing. And it went from persuading, selling 7th and 8th graders that English was worth learning and that they should do it well and right, to working with sales professionals and helping them to understand that it's not just what you say, but it's how you say it that's going to be more persuasive or not. And that's where I am today.
Right now, the elephant in the room is we're in this pandemic. We're still in the midst of this. Obviously, there's a lot of changes and across the world in different industries, both positive and negative. And so I wanted to ask you, how has this, pandemic changed the way you do and operate your business?
Well, almost in every way. As a sales trainer, I travel internationally. That was my thing. I have over 6 million miles on American Airlines, and boy, do I miss that travel. And that has come to a complete halt. In the intro, you mentioned hospitality, and so it kind of goes hand in hand. That was really my niche. And so, but I have been able to transform to doing webinars. I don't find them as personally satisfying. I'm sure the participants don't find them as easy to learn from, but it is a good tool that will help us to ensure that people are updating their skills, because along with the pandemic, selling skills have changed. And those people who are adapting new ways, for instance, slowing down the sales process. There can't be push communications anymore. We really do need to show compassion, but not drama. If I read one more or hear one more person say, in these unprecedented times, or, do you think that saying in these unsettling times that settles me? It does just the opposite. So really learning how to show compassion, but not being dramatic. There's been just a different focus and making sure that the other human being feels appreciated, that messaging isn't just transactional. There have really been a lot of changes. And so I've been able to transform the sales aspects to webinar online learning format. That's been the big thing. But as you know, my thing is email, and email has become even more important now. So that's kind of cool. The only ways to sell, we have digital and we have virtual, right? And digital is the bridge. Email is the bridge to video, to every sort of communication tool. There's always going to be something written, whether it's texting or whether it's email, whether it's Slack, doesn't matter. There's written communication. And if you do it well, you get better results.
So to unpack that piece a little bit, would you mind sharing as far as like more of your the why and the importance behind email, and more specifically just the power of writing, which you have a book on, sales power of sales writing. Why is that such an important avenue for sales professionals to really consider, especially right now during these times?
Yeah, well, since you mentioned, I just have to do my little show and tell here. I actually have two books there,
Awesome.
Power Sales Writing and How to Say It to Sell It. And writing has always been important. But now, because people are pretty much on this little emotional tightrope, they're even more likely to misinterpret your tone. They're more likely to not give you the benefit of the doubt. And so being able to communicate in a way that extends your hand and elevates the conversation and makes the other human being feel cared about. And I'm talking internally as well as externally. And I'm talking about, it doesn't matter if what you're selling is artificial intelligence or an iPhone. You need to be able to communicate in a way that puts the other person at ease and creates a level of emotional certainty. And that has become more and more important. Though writing, I mean, you're talking to an old English teacher. I taught English at Arizona State University. Fear the fork. I taught English teachers how to teach English, and so this has always been my passion. And now it's become even more important because we can't get the Zoom meeting unless you communicate with them first. People just don't turn on their Zoom and say, well, who's coming today? There needs to be a persuasion to something that's in it for me to give up my time and to sit in front of a Zoom and listen to your sales pitch. So I think email has really become elevated in its importance.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of articulating that. It's the bridge to have the next conversation, or, like the next process as far as, where you're at in your sales process, or really any function within business in general, because I think writing and communication skills are essential regardless of if you're in sales or not. So I think that's well said. So before we unpack more of like email and writing specifically, I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure you've talked to, coached, and seen a lot of sales professionals try and attempt to use, email and writing as a means to sell. What are some of the common mistakes you've noticed or seen sales professional make when it comes to writing?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? um, Okay, so maybe the oh gosh, so one of the biggest challenges is that people think that they're writing about the client when really they're just writing about themselves. So that one is a little bit more difficult to discuss in a very quick situation. So it's more of an awareness. One of the very basic things I do is I'll have somebody look at their email and just circle all the times that they've use the word I, print out your last three emails and circle how many times you've used the word I or we or mentioned your company name. That's usually a good way to see how self-centered you're being in your communication skills. Another one is that people think that email, and I mentioned it briefly already, is just a transactional tool. You ask me a question, I answer your question, we're done. In fact, there are people who encourage you to be writing, so it has to be concise, it has to be short. Well, you know what? It's amazing that if it really resonates for me, if it's relevant to your buyer, they'll continue to read. But if it isn't, they won't. It's like I can binge the Americans and sit still for 6 hours without ever going to the bathroom, right? But if you ask me to sit for 3 hours in front of a webinar, I'm like crazy, right? So it kind of ties back to, is it relevant to them? Does it resonate for them? And the action step, making it frictionless, making it easy. There are people who don't even have action steps, or they leave it wide open to the universe. Like, should we talk? Well, yeah, maybe we should. But the seller takes no control and doesn't make it easy for the person to respond and to give them the result that they want. So I guess maybe those are the three that I'm seeing most now, but I could go on and on about the transaction. There needs to be excitement. There needs to be some psychology used. We need to use brain-friendly messaging, and what we do often is just answer.
Yeah, and I guess to help the audience understand a picture of how you do it, obviously you and I have been communicating on LinkedIn and email, and one of the things that I really appreciated about our dialogue is obviously, like I think it was a few weeks ago, I was feeling under the weather, and I just remember you asking or mentioning it throughout different conversations, even if it wasn't necessarily relevant right away. You would start off and say, "Hey, I hope you're doing better," or I assume by this point you're 100%. I think those little things, those little details really allow for me to build trust and really see like you as a human being, not as a person like we're trying to have this transaction with. No, like we're two individuals who are human beings who want to do this podcast together. So for those of you, as far as like what you want to see, like if you guys want to get a taste of what it's like to communicate with Sue, maybe shoot her a LinkedIn message and see what it's like.
And thank you for that. And thank you for letting me know that impacted you. The thing is that I wasn't using that as any sort of sales strategy. That was really, you had mentioned that, and being sick particularly now is never a good thing, right? Is not a good thing. And so I was truly extending my concern to you, and my hope that you were feeling better. The challenge is that a little bit earlier, I think I was talking about maybe I didn't mention it, but thinking about eliminating the drama. So yes, I did. So we need to be careful that we don't go deep into somebody else's drama, and that we are always trying to elevate the conversation. And so I might have, and I don't remember it really, Jonathan, but I might have in some ways said something about getting better, maybe even flippantly. But my goal was to make sure that there was some positivity in that communication, knowing that you were a bit under the weather.
We hope you're enjoying today's episode. Here's a quick shout out to today's sponsor. Intellacall is a video software that connects your customers with anyone in your organization with just one click from your website. But in a world filled with video software, why should you consider Intellacall? I'll tell you why using one word: simplicity. Intellacall allows you to connect via video without downloading any software, sending any meeting IDs, or passwords. On top of that, Intellacall integrates directly onto your website, so if any customers or prospects want to get in contact with you directly, they can do just that. For more information on Intellacall or to schedule a demo, please visit us at www.intellacall.com. And now, back to today's episode. Personalization really matters with messaging, with writing, because if you do that really well, a lot of times your buyers or whoever it is you're looking to connect with will actually listen or actually read what you're writing.
Yes. And my gosh, excuse me, that brings up a whole nother point that I didn't mention: a lack of personalization. I mean, it's like shame on anyone who doesn't go on LinkedIn and get a little bit of intel, right? But then you have to be careful about the personalization, because once again, it has to be authentic. To say, I'm impressed with your blog posts or whatever, that's not personalization. But find one point from one blog post. You don't have to spend the entire day, and say, this was really thoughtful and I'm trying to apply it in this way. Be real. Again, authenticity is like everything, and even more so today.
Yeah. And so to kind of expand a little bit more on just the power of writing, you showed us the two books that you had written over the previous years. And so I wanted to talk specifically about power sales writing, and specifically what the book is about, and also too what the maybe overall objective as far as what you were trying to articulate through the book, so people at least can get an understanding, and obviously for them to inquire more about the book if they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, thanks so much. So if I might, Power Sales Writing, I actually first self-published. This goes back a long time ago when I had to put manuscripts into the mail and get rejected by everyone. So I self-published, and then McGraw-Hill came to me from that book and said, let's do an update, and we're going to publish it because people are really not talking about emailing, that we all think we can email, but there's skill involved in that. And we need to be purposeful. And there are formulas that are more brain friendly than not. And so I wrote that book that McGraw-Hill published. And then I'm going to say 8 years after that, they again came to me and said, maybe it's time for an update. And I said, yes. And so that is what we did. But the whole point was that just because you can doesn't mean you can do it well. and there's technique to everything, whether you're a runner or you're a skier or whatever it is that you happen to do, you can do it or you can learn to do it even better. And that was my goal with email. And of course, it does harken back to the fact that I'm an English teacher. And what I really want is for people to be able to be at their best, to be able to communicate in a way that is appealing and does get results.
It makes total sense. And I think that's one of the things I've noticed is talking to different sales professionals. Some people are really good. Hey, just let me be in front of the person. Just put me in front of them and I'll be able to sell. I'll be able to close. But it's trying to put all the pieces together. There's so many aspects of selling, whether it is email, social selling. Obviously, there's outbound, there's inbound. There's so many different methods, and I think it's not necessarily like saying, "Hey, like there's this one cold calling works or this work." Like it's like all of it works, but it has to be a part of an overall strategy. And I think email and specifically writing is that bridge, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to get that meeting, to be able to get that demo booked, or whatever it is you're looking for your customers to do there.
To your point, put me in front of a customer. Well, now you can't get in front of the customer. You can do video, you can do a Zoom, but how are you going to get there? And often, and this is pre-pandemic, customers don't necessarily want to see you. And so if you can have that communication, right? If you can move them along their buying journey in a way that's appealing, well, they'll be more likely to see you. But sometimes it's not even necessary. I mean, with all the tools we have now, we don't necessarily need to be together, right? Pharma industry, a drug rep can't get to see a physician anymore. A hospitality industry, are you really going to go to the hotel and do the same sort of site inspection? It doesn't matter what type of industry we're talking about. If you can convey trust and you can convey emotional certainty in your writing, you have that much of an edge above everybody else.
Well said. And so before I ask you the last question, Sue, I wanted to ask you, is there any final thoughts you have on the topic of sales, but specifically virtual selling, especially during these times? Like, is there any concluding remarks before I ask you the last question?
Yeah, thanks. Probably nothing profound, just that we have two options, right? Digital and virtual. And those people who are willing to improve their skills in both of those areas, they're going to be the ones that no matter what comes their way, they're going to be able to survive and thrive. And that's really what I would like people to know.
Yeah, and awesome. Well, if people are interested in learning more about you, obviously your writing and books and different resources that you provide, what are some of the best ways to connect with you, Sue?
Okay, well, Sue at speakersue.com. That's Sue at speakersue.com. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Speaker Sue, everything, just because Sue Hershkowitz-Coore, my full name, who's going to remember that? So just look for Speaker Sue and it'll be me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sue, for coming on the podcast and obviously really highlighting an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to sales with email and with writing. And obviously there's a lot of takeaways as far as what's worked for you, what hasn't, what you've seen as far as like, even some mistakes sales professionals have made. And so with the goal of informing the audience to say there is a better way, just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you know how to do it correctly. And so obviously when you have people like Sue who are experts in this area, reaching out to her, checking out her book and checking out her content, she provides a lot of helpful content. So thanks again, Sue, for coming on the podcast and sharing your insight and wisdom.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Take care. Good luck, everyone. Thank you. Bye.